The morning sun painted the sky orange over New Haven Village on Kepler 442b. Hannah walked through the wheat fields, checking the crops that would be ready for harvest in 2 weeks. At 22, she was the youngest person in the colony to become a veterinarian, but animals had always made more sense to her than people. Her younger brother Minho ran between the rows of grain, chasing butterflies with wings that sparkled like jewels. These creatures were native to this world, unlike the earth crops the colonists grew. Everything here was different from the old planet their grandparents had left behind. "Hannah, look at this one," Minho called out, pointing at a butterfly with silver and blue wings. "It's huge." She smiled and walked over to him. The butterfly was indeed large, about the size of her hand. "That's a crystal wing," she told him. "They only come out when the weather is perfect." Their parents, Junho and Yuna, worked in the fields nearby. Their father drove the harvesting machine while their mother sorted the grain. It was a peaceful life in New Haven, one of the smaller settlements on this frontier world. 500 people called this place home, far from the busy cities near the spaceport. The ground began to shake. At first, Hannah thought it was another transport ship landing at the nearby pad. Ships came and went every few days, bringing supplies from Earth or taking their crops to other worlds. But the shaking grew stronger and she could hear something else, a deep rumbling sound that came from the forest. "What is that?" Minho asked, his eyes wide. Hannah looked toward the tree line. The rumbling grew louder, and she could see birds flying away from the forest in large flocks. Something was coming, something big. "Mom, Dad," she called out, but they were too far away to hear her over the noise of the harvester. The ground shook harder now. Hannah grabbed Minho's hand and started running toward their parents. The rumbling sound became a roar, and trees at the forest edge began to fall. Then she saw it. A Titan mammoth burst from the forest. But this one was different from the gentle giants she had studied. This creature was huge, even for its species, standing 4 meters tall with tusks as long as a man. Its gray skin was covered in strange glowing spots that pulsed with sick yellow light. The mammoth's eyes were wild with pain and rage. The beast charged straight toward the village. "Everyone run!" Hannah shouted, but her voice was lost in the chaos. The mammoth crashed through the first houses like they were made of paper. Wood and metal flew everywhere as the creature trampled everything in its path. Hannah pulled Minho toward their parents, but the boy tripped and fell. She helped him up, but precious seconds were lost. The mammoth was getting closer, destroying more houses with each step. Their father saw them and jumped from the harvester. "Hannah, Minho, this way," he yelled, running toward them. Their mother screamed from somewhere behind the grain sorter. The mammoth charged through the center of the village now. People ran in all directions, some toward the forest, others toward the emergency shelters. But the creature moved faster than anyone expected. Its huge feet crushed gardens, vehicles, and anything else in the way. Hannah could see the glowing spots on the mammoth's skin more clearly now. They were not part of the animal. They were something else, something that moved and writhed like living things attached to the giant creature. "The parasites," she whispered, understanding flooding through her. She had read about them in her veterinary studies but never seen them. Neural feeders, creatures that burrowed into the brain tissue of large animals and drove them mad with pain. Junho reached them and grabbed both his children. "The shelter now," he said, pushing them toward the underground bunker at the village center. But they were too late. The mammoth turned toward them, its wild eyes fixed on their small group. Hannah could see the pain in those eyes, the confusion and terror. This was not an evil creature, it was suffering. "No," she said, stepping forward. "Hannah, what are you doing?" her father shouted. The mammoth charged. Junho pushed his children aside and stood between them and the beast. The massive animal struck him with its tusk and he flew through the air like a broken doll. "Dad!" Minho screamed, running toward his father's still form. The mammoth's foot came down where the boy ran. Hannah heard her brother's cry cut short. She could not move, could not breathe, could not think. Her mother's voice came from behind her, calling her name. Then that voice too was silenced as the mammoth's rampage continued. Colonial Defense Force vehicles arrived with sirens wailing. Soldiers jumped out with plasma rifles ready to kill the creature. "Wait," Hannah said, but her voice was too quiet. "Wait," she said again, louder this time. "Wait," she screamed, running between the soldiers and the mammoth. The creature had stopped, moving, and stood among the ruins of the village, swaying from side to side. The glowing parasites on its skin pulsed brighter, and the mammoth trumpeted in pain. "Don't shoot it," Hannah said to the soldiers. "It's not the animal's fault." "Get out of the way, girl," the squad leader said. "That thing just destroyed your village." "The parasites are controlling it," Hannah explained, pointing at the glowing spots. "Neural feeders. They burrow into the brain and cause madness. The mammoth is in terrible pain." "I don't care what's wrong with it," the soldier replied. "It killed people." Hannah looked at the mammoth. The creature's eyes met hers, and she saw something there. Intelligence, pain, and something else. Shame. The animal knew what it had done, even though it could not control itself. "Please," she said to the soldiers, "let me help it." "You're in shock," another soldier said. "That thing killed your family." Hannah looked around at the destroyed village, at the place where her brother had fallen, at the harvester where her father had been working just minutes before. Everything was gone. Everyone she loved was dead. But the mammoth was still suffering. She walked slowly toward the giant creature, ignoring the soldiers' shouts behind her. The mammoth watched her approach but did not move. Up close, she could see the parasites clearly. They were like glowing worms, each one the size of her finger buried in the mammoth's thick skin. "I know it hurts," she said softly to the animal. "I can make it stop." Hannah reached into her veterinary kit, which she always carried, and pulled out a pair of extraction forceps. The mammoth lowered its massive head toward her, as if it understood what she was trying to do. One by one, she removed the parasites from the creature's skin. Each time she pulled one free, the mammoth's breathing became easier, the glowing spots faded, and the animal's eyes became clearer. When the last parasite was gone, the mammoth stepped back and looked at her with eyes full of intelligence and gratitude. It trumpeted once, softly, then turned and walked back toward the forest. The soldiers lowered their weapons, staring in amazement. Hannah stood alone in the ruins of her village, surrounded by the destruction and death that the mammoth had caused. She should have felt anger, should have wanted revenge. Instead, she felt only sadness for the creature that had been forced to do terrible things. The mammoth stopped at the forest edge and looked back at her one last time before disappearing into the trees. 3 days after the mammoth attack, the survivors of New Haven Village gathered in the temporary shelter that the Colonial Defense Force had built. 47 people had died in the trampling, including Hannah's family. The rest looked at her, with cold eyes as she sat alone in the corner. Village leader Deki stood before the crowd, his weathered face hard with anger. He had lost his wife and grandson in the attack. Behind him, other survivors nodded as he spoke. "We all saw what happened," Deki said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "That monster destroyed our homes and killed our families. It should have been put down immediately." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. But Hannah stopped. "Our defenders from doing their job," Deki continued, pointing at her. "She chose to save the beast that murdered her own brother and parents." Hannah looked up from where she sat. The mammoth was sick. The parasites were controlling it. "I don't care if it was sick," shouted Minji, an older woman who had lost her husband. "It killed people. It destroyed everything we built here." "The creature was in pain," Hannah said quietly. "It didn't choose to attack us." "But you chose to save it," Deki replied. "You put that animal's life above human lives, above your own family's lives." The words hit Hannah like a physical blow. She had saved the mammoth because it was the right thing to do, but she could not explain that to people who had lost everything. "We cannot trust someone who cares more about alien beasts than her own people," Deki said. "The Colony Council has made its decision. Hannah, you are no longer welcome in any human settlement on this world." Hannah stood up slowly. "You're exiling me?" "You exiled yourself when you saved that monster," Minji said. We can't have someone like you living among us." The other survivors looked away as Hana walked toward the door. No one spoke in her defense. No one said goodbye. She had saved their village from having innocent blood on their hands, but they could not see it that way. At the door, Daiki handed her a survival pack with basic supplies. "You have 1 hour to leave the settlement area," he said. "Don't come back." Hana took the pack and walked out into the morning sun. The ruins of New Haven lay scattered around her, broken buildings and overturned vehicles marking where the mammoth had passed. She could see the graves they had dug for the dead, 47 mounds of earth in neat rows. She walked to 3 graves at the end of the line where her family lay buried. Someone had carved their names into wooden markers. Junho, Yuna, Minho. She knelt beside the graves and placed her hand on the fresh earth. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I couldn't save you, but I couldn't let them kill an innocent creature either." The wind blew across the settlement, carrying the scent of the forest. Hana stood up, shouldered her pack, and walked toward the trees. She did not look back. The forest of Kepler 442b was beautiful but dangerous. Trees grew taller than any on Earth, their purple leaves creating a canopy so thick that little sunlight reached the ground. Strange plants glowed with soft light, and alien birds called from branches high above. Hana followed animal paths deeper into the wilderness. She had studied the local ecosystem during her veterinary training, but knowing about something and living in it were different things. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow could hide a predator. On her first night alone, she built a small shelter against a fallen tree and tried to sleep. The sounds of the forest kept her awake. Howls and growls echoed through the darkness, along with other noises she could not identify. Something large moved in the bushes nearby. Hana grabbed the plasma cutter from her survival kit, the only weapon she had. The sound came closer, branches breaking under heavy feet. Then she heard it, a low rumble that she recognized. The mammoth stepped into the clearing where she had made camp. In the moonlight, she could see it clearly. The same creature she had saved, the one that had destroyed her village. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her. Hana's hand tightened on the plasma cutter, but she did not raise it. The mammoth made no aggressive moves. It simply stood there, its intelligent eyes reflecting the light from her small fire. "What do you want?" she asked softly. The mammoth trumpeted quietly, a sound she had learned meant greeting or acknowledgement. Then it turned and walked back into the forest. Hana did not sleep that night. The next morning, she continued deeper into the wilderness. She found a stream and followed it upstream, looking for a good place to build a more permanent shelter. The mammoth's tracks were visible in the mud beside the water. It was following her. For days, this pattern continued. Hana would make camp and the mammoth would appear at the edge of the clearing. It never came close, never threatened her, but it was always there, watching, waiting. On the 4th day, as she struggled to build a lean-to shelter against a large rock, the mammoth approached closer than before. It stopped about 20 meters away and made a different sound, a series of low rumbles and chirps that seemed almost like speech. Hana looked up from her work. The mammoth was looking at something behind her. She turned and saw a pack of razor wolves emerging from the bushes. These predators were the size of earth wolves, but with metallic teeth and claws that could cut through steel. The pack leader snarled and crept forward. Hana raised her plasma cutter, but she knew it would not be enough against 6 wolves. The mammoth charged. The huge creature scattered the wolves like leaves in a storm. Its massive feet crushed one wolf instantly, while its tusks swept 2 others aside. The remaining wolves fled into the forest, yelping in fear. Hana stared at the mammoth in amazement. It had saved her life. The creature looked at her for a long moment, then walked to a nearby tree. Using its trunk, it pushed over a dead tree that landed perfectly to form the roof of her shelter. "Thank you," Hana said. The mammoth rumbled softly, a sound that seemed almost like purring. From that day on, their relationship changed. The mammoth, which Hana began calling Goliath because of its enormous size, became her protector and helper. It brought her fruits from high branches she could not reach. It warned her of dangerous animals by trumpeting softly. When she got lost, it guided her back to fresh water. In return, Hana tended to Goliath's minor injuries and removed thorns from its feet. She talked to it while she worked, and slowly began to understand its complex language of sounds and gestures. Weeks passed. Hana learned to survive in the wilderness, building better shelters and finding edible plants. Goliath was always nearby, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden in the forest, but always watching over her. One evening, as she sat by her fire preparing her dinner, Goliath approached and lay down beside her camp. For the first time, the massive creature was close enough that she could touch it. Hana reached out slowly and placed her hand on Goliath's rough skin. The mammoth's eyes closed, and it made a sound of contentment. "We're both alone now," she said quietly. "But maybe we don't have to be lonely." Goliath's trunk reached out and gently touched her shoulder, a gesture that seemed to say they understood each other. Far away, the lights of the human settlements twinkled in the distance. Hana had been cast out from her own kind, but she had found something else in the wilderness. She had found a friend who had also lost everything, who also knew what it meant to be alone. The woman and the mammoth sat together under the alien stars. Two outcasts who had chosen forgiveness over hatred, understanding over revenge. 6 months had passed since Hana began living in the wilderness with Goliath. She had grown stronger and smarter about surviving in the alien forest. Her skin was tanned from the purple sun, and her muscles were lean from climbing trees and building shelters. More importantly, she had learned to understand Goliath's language. The mammoth spoke through sounds and movements that were far more complex than humans had ever realized. Different trumpet calls meant different things. A short blast meant danger. A long, low rumble meant contentment. A series of quick chirps meant curiosity or excitement. But it was the body language that taught Hana the most. The way Goliath moved his trunk, positioned his ears, or shifted his weight all carried meaning. It was like learning a completely new way to communicate. On this particular morning, Goliath was acting strangely. He kept walking toward the eastern mountains, then coming back to Hana, then walking east again. His trunk swayed back and forth, in a pattern she had never seen before. "What is it, boy?" she asked, using the nickname she had given him despite his enormous size. Goliath trumpeted softly and walked east again. This time, he did not come back. He stopped at the edge of their camp and looked at her expectantly. "You want me to follow you?" The mammoth nodded, a gesture Hana had taught him months ago. But this nod was different. It was urgent, excited. Hana packed her basic supplies and followed Goliath into the mountains. They climbed rocky paths that she had never seen before, paths that seemed too well made to be natural. The stone under her feet was smooth and fitted, together in patterns. "These are roads," she said aloud. "Someone built these roads." Goliath rumbled in agreement and kept climbing. They climbed for hours, higher than Hana had ever been on this world. The air grew thinner, and she had to rest, often, but Goliath was patient, waiting for her to catch her breath before continuing upward. Finally, they reached a plateau between two mountain peaks. What Hana saw there made her stop and stare in amazement. Ruins covered the entire plateau. Not human ruins, but something else entirely. The buildings were massive, built for creatures much larger than humans. The doorways were 5 meters tall and 3 meters wide. The walls were made of stone blocks that weighed tons each. But the most amazing thing was how well preserved everything was. These ruins were old, thousands of years old, but they looked like they had been abandoned yesterday. "Goliath," she whispered. "Who built this place?" The mammoth walked to the largest building and placed his trunk against a symbol carved into the stone. The symbol looked like a mammoth, but it was surrounded by stars and geometric patterns that suggested intelligence and civilization. "Your people," Hana said, understanding flooding through her. "Your ancestors built this city." Goliath trumpeted loudly, a sound of pride and sadness mixed together. Hana explored the ruins with wonder. Every building told a story of a sophisticated civilization. She found libraries filled with stone tablets covered in symbols. She found workshops with tools designed for mammoth trunks. She found art galleries with statues and paintings that showed mammoths working together on complex projects. In the center of the city, she found the most incredible discovery of all. A building that hummed with energy, its walls covered in crystals that glowed with soft blue light. Inside, she found machines that were still working after thousands of years. The machines were unlike anything humans had built. They seemed to be grown rather than constructed, made of crystal and metal fused together in organic shapes. Touch panels responded to Goliath's trunk, and images appeared in the air above them. "These are memory crystals," Hana said, recognizing the technology from her studies. "They store information." Goliath activated one of the machines, and suddenly, the air filled with moving pictures. Hana watched in amazement as the history of the mammoth civilization unfolded before her eyes. She saw mammoths building cities, creating art, and developing technology. They had been the dominant species on Kepler 442b for millions of years. Their civilization had reached incredible heights, with cities that floated in the sky and machines that could control weather. But then disaster struck. The images showed meteors falling from space, volcanoes erupting, and earthquakes splitting the ground. A natural catastrophe had destroyed their civilization almost overnight. The surviving mammoths had fled to the forests and grasslands, becoming the simple herders that humans found when they arrived on the planet. Over thousands of years, they had forgotten how to use their technology, but they had never forgotten their history. "The collective memory," Hana said, understanding at last. "That's how you remember. Each generation passes the knowledge to the next through your sounds and movements." Goliath activated another memory crystal, and this one showed something that made Hana's heart race. It showed the recent history of the planet from the mammoth perspective. She watched as human ships arrived on Kepler 442b. She saw the first settlements being built and the early encounters between humans and mammoths. Most importantly, she saw how the mammoths had reacted to the human colonization. They had been curious about the newcomers. The mammoth elders had debated whether to reveal themselves as intelligent beings or to remain hidden. In the end, they had chosen to watch and wait, allowing humans to build their settlements while the mammoths observed from a distance. The mammoths had been studying human behavior, learning human languages, and trying to understand these strange new creatures who had come from the stars. "You've been watching us all along," Hana said. "You knew we were intelligent, but we never realized you were intelligent too." Goliath made a sound that she had learned meant sadness and regret. The final memory crystal showed the recent conflicts between humans and mammoths. As human settlements expanded, they had begun to encroach on mammoth territory. The parasites that had driven Goliath mad were actually a weapon used by some younger mammoths who wanted to drive the humans away. But the attack on New Haven had not been planned. Goliath had been infected by accident when he tried to stop the younger mammoths from using the parasites. The neural feeders had driven him into a rage, and he had destroyed the village without meaning to. "You were trying to protect us," Hana said, placing her hand on Goliath's trunk. "You were trying to stop the attack, not cause it." Goliath's eyes filled with what looked like tears. He trumpeted softly, a sound of profound sorrow and guilt. Hana spent the rest of the day exploring the ruins and learning about mammoth civilization. She found star charts that showed the mammoths had once traveled to other worlds. She found genetic records that proved they were as intelligent as humans, just in different ways. Most importantly, she found communication devices that were still working. The mammoths had maintained contact with each other across the planet through a network of crystal transmitters. "Goliath," she said, as the sun began to set over the ancient city. "We need to tell the other humans about this. They need to know that your people are not just animals. You're an intelligent civilization that was here long before we arrived." Goliath made a sound of agreement, but also of worry. "I know they might not listen," Hana said. "They exiled me for saving you, But this changes everything. Humans and mammoths can work together. We can learn from each other. She looked out over the ruins of the mammoth city, imagining what it must have been like when it was alive with activity. Now she understood why Goliath had brought her here. He wanted her to know the truth about his people. But more than that, he wanted her to help bridge the gap between two intelligent species who had been living on the same world without truly understanding each other. "We'll find a way," she promised him. "Somehow, we'll make them understand." As night fell over the ancient city, Hannah and Goliath sat together among the ruins of a lost civilization. She had come to this world as a simple veterinarian, but now, she carried the weight of two species' futures on her shoulders. The memory crystals hummed softly around them, holding the wisdom of millions of years of mammoth civilization. And in that wisdom, Hannah began to see the path forward. 2 years had passed since Hannah discovered the mammoth ruins. She now lived between two worlds, spending time with Goliath and his herd while also maintaining the ancient crystal communication network. Through the crystals, she had learned to speak with mammoth communities across the entire planet. The mammoths had accepted her as the first human to truly understand their civilization. They called her the bridge walker, the one who could move between species. Hannah had grown wise in mammoth lore and had even learned to use some of their ancient technology. But on this cold morning, the crystal network brought terrible news. Emergency. Signals flashed across the communication system in patterns of red and gold light. Mammoth communities from all over Kepler 442b were sending the same urgent message. Ships had appeared in the sky. Not human ships, but something else. Something dangerous. Hannah pressed her hands against the largest communication crystal and felt the fear radiating from mammoth herds hundreds of kilometers away. Through their shared memories, she saw what they saw. Black ships shaped like thorns hung in the sky above the human settlements. The ships were made of a dark crystal that seemed to absorb light. Strange beings moved around the ships, creatures that looked like walking gems with too many arms and glowing eyes. "The Voidborn," Hannah whispered, recognizing the species from the mammoth historical records. They were an ancient enemy that the mammoths had fought long ago, before the great catastrophe that destroyed their civilization. Goliath trumpeted urgently beside her. Through their bond, she could feel his memories of the old stories. The Voidborn traveled from world to world, harvesting all biological life to fuel their crystal ships. They saw both humans and mammoths as nothing more than resources to be collected. The crystal network showed her the attacks beginning. The Voidborn ships fired beams of energy that paralyzed living creatures without killing them. Then mechanical harvesters descended to collect the helpless victims. Human defense ships rose to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the Voidborn crystal hulls. The colony's military had been designed to fight human enemies, not alien technology that was thousands of years more advanced. "They need help," Hannah said, watching human fighters explode in the alien weapon fire. "The colonists don't stand a chance alone." Goliath made a complex series of sounds that Hannah had learned meant deep thought and planning. Other mammoths around. The ancient city began gathering, their own trumpet calls carrying across the ruins. Within hours, mammoth herds from across the continent began arriving at the ancient city. Hannah watched in amazement as hundreds of the giant creatures filled the plateau. She had never seen so many mammoths in one place. The eldest mammoth, a massive female named Wisestone by the others, approached Hannah. Through trunk gestures and trumpet calls, she communicated a simple message. The mammoths were ready to fight, but they needed someone to coordinate between mammoth instincts and human tactics. "You want me to lead a combined attack?" Hannah asked. Wisestone nodded solemnly. The mammoth memories contained knowledge of the Voidborn and their weaknesses, but the mammoths needed human technology to exploit those weaknesses effectively. Hannah looked out over the assembled herd. There were nearly 300 mammoths from young adults to ancient elders. All of them looked at her with trust and expectation. "We go to war then," she said. The march to New Haven took 2 days. Hannah rode on Goliath's back while the massive herd moved through forests and across grasslands like a living earthquake. The ground shook under their feet, and their trumpet calls echoed across the landscape like thunder. As they approached the human settlements, Hana could see the devastation the Voidborn had already caused. Burned fields stretched for kilometers. Abandoned vehicles lay scattered along the roads. The sky was dark with smoke from burning buildings, but the worst sight was the harvest fields. Thousands of humans lay paralyzed in neat rows while Voidborn machines prepared to load them onto the ships. The people were still alive but could not move or speak. "We're too late for some of them," Hana said, her heart breaking at the sight. Goliath trumpeted angrily, and the sound was picked up by the other mammoths. Their calls became a war song that made the air itself vibrate with power. The surviving defenders of New Haven had taken refuge in the underground bunkers. When the mammoth herd appeared on the horizon, Colonial Defense Force soldiers emerged with their weapons ready. "Hold your fire," came a familiar voice. Daiki stepped forward, looking older and more tired than Hana remembered. Behind him stood other survivors from the village she had once called home. "Hana?" Daiki said, staring up at her in amazement. "Is that really you?" She climbed down from Goliath's back and faced the man who had exiled her 2 years ago. "Hello, Daiki. I brought help." The village leader looked at the hundreds of mammoths surrounding them. "These creatures are here to help us." "They're not just creatures," Hana said. "They're people just like us, and they want to stop the Voidborn as much as we do." A Voidborn ship appeared over the nearby hills, its dark crystal hull reflecting no light. Energy beams lanced down toward the human bunkers, but the mammoth herd was ready. The mammoths had a natural ability that humans had never understood. Their brains generated powerful electromagnetic fields that they used for long-distance communication. Working together, they could create an electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disrupt advanced technology. 300 mammoth minds focused as one, guided by Hana's knowledge of Voidborn technology. The electromagnetic pulse they generated was invisible but incredibly powerful. It washed over the Voidborn ship like a wave. The ship's systems failed instantly. Its engines died, its weapons went silent, and it crashed into the forest with a sound like breaking glass. "Impossible," whispered a Defense Force officer. "Nothing can bring down a Voidborn ship that easily." "The mammoths can," Hana said. "But we need to coordinate our attacks. The Voidborn will adapt quickly." More ships appeared in the distance, but now Hana was ready for them. She had spent 2 years learning to communicate with mammoths, and now she put that knowledge to use as a battlefield commander. "Strike teams of 50 mammoths each," she called out, her voice carrying across the herd through Goliath's amplified trumpet calls. "Surround the ships and hit them with coordinated pulses. Human fighters attack immediately after each pulse while their systems are down." The battle was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Mammoth herds moved across the landscape, like living thunderstorms, their electromagnetic pulses lighting up the sky. Human fighters swooped in during the brief moments when Voidborn ships were vulnerable, their plasma weapons finally able to penetrate the alien hulls. Hana rode Goliath into the heart of the battle, coordinating attacks and calling out enemy positions. The sight of a human woman leading a mammoth army became legendary in those hours. But the real victory came when the mammoths reached the harvest fields. Their electromagnetic pulses freed the paralyzed humans, who began waking up by the thousands. The Voidborn had counted on harvesting helpless victims, but now they faced an entire planet fighting back. By sunset, the last Voidborn ship was fleeing into space. The alien invasion had been completely defeated. Hana stood in the ruins of New Haven, surrounded by the people who had once exiled her. Daiki approached her slowly, his face filled with shame and wonder. "I was wrong about you," he said. "About everything. Can you forgive us?" Hana looked around at the mammoth herd, at Goliath standing patiently beside her, at the freed humans celebrating their survival. "There's nothing to forgive," she said. "We all did what we thought was right." "But how did you know?" asked Minji, the woman who had been so angry at Hana's exile. "How did you know the mammoths would help us?" Hana smiled and placed her hand on Goliath's trunk. "I learned to listen. And when you really listen to someone, you discover they're not so different from you after all. The mammoth herd began to disperse, returning to their territories across the planet. But something had changed forever. Humans and mammoths had fought together as allies, and both species would remember this day. As the stars came out over the battlefield, Hana realized that her exile had not been a punishment. It had been the first step towards something much greater than anyone could have imagined. 5 years had passed since the Battle of New Haven, and Kepler 442b had become the most famous planet in human space. The story of the woman who rode with mammoths had spread to every colony world and even reached Earth itself. Hana stood on a platform overlooking the new city that had been built where New Haven once stood. But this was not just a human city. It was something completely new in the galaxy. A place where two intelligent species lived and worked together as equals. The buildings were designed for both humans and mammoths. Wide streets allowed the giant creatures to move freely, while smaller pathways served human needs. Mammoth-operated machines worked alongside human technology, creating solutions that neither species could have achieved alone. "Ambassador Hana," called a voice behind her. She turned to see Captain Yongho of the colonial fleet approaching with a group of visitors. These were delegates from other worlds who had come to see the miracle of Kepler 442b for themselves. "Just Hana, please," she said with a smile. The title of ambassador had been forced on her by the Colonial Council, but she preferred to think of herself simply as a bridge between worlds. "The delegates would like to see the Joint Research Center," Captain Yongho said. "They're particularly interested in the bioelectric technologies." Hana nodded and gestured for the group to follow her. They walked through streets where human children played alongside young mammoths, where mammoth elders shared their ancient stories with human historians, and where scientists from both species worked together on projects that amazed the galaxy. HFY Research Center was the crown jewel of the new civilization. Here, mammoth electromagnetic abilities had been combined with human engineering to create technologies that seemed like magic. Computers that ran on biological processes, vehicles that moved without fuel, and communication systems that could reach across star systems instantly. "How did you make this possible?" asked one delegate, a stern woman from the Mars colonies. "Our reports say these creatures were just animals before you arrived." "They were never just animals," Hana replied, leading the group past laboratories where mammoth scientists worked with crystalline computers. "We just never bothered to really look at them. We saw what we expected to see instead of what was actually there." In the main laboratory, Goliath was working with a team of human engineers on a new type of spacecraft engine. The mammoth had become one of the colony's leading scientists, his ancient memories providing insights that human minds could never have reached alone. "Goliath remembers technologies from before the Great Catastrophe," Hana explained to the amazed delegates. "His people once traveled between stars using methods we're only beginning to understand." The mammoth looked up from his work and trumpeted a greeting. Hana trumpeted back, the complex language now as natural to her as speaking human words. "You can really talk to them?" asked a young delegate from the Centauri system. "Talking is just the beginning," Hana said. "When you truly communicate with someone, you start to understand how they think, what they value, what they fear. You realize that intelligence comes in many forms." They moved to the cultural center, where mammoth artists were creating sculptures alongside human painters. The art that emerged from their collaboration was unlike anything either species had produced alone. It seemed to capture emotions and ideas that had no names in any language. "The mammoth collective memory goes back millions of years," Hana explained. "They remember the rise and fall of civilizations, the patterns of stars, the songs of species that no longer exist. When they share those memories through art, it changes how we see the universe." An elderly mammoth approached them, moving slowly, but with great dignity. This was Wise Stone, now over 200 years old and the unofficial leader of the mammoth community. Wise Stone touched Hana's shoulder with her trunk, a gesture of deep respect and affection. Through their shared language, she communicated a message for the delegates. Wise Stone says that before humans came, her people were dying. Hana translated. Not from disease or war, but from loneliness. They had become so few that they were losing their culture, their memories, their hope for the future. The ancient mammoth continued speaking, her trunk gestures flowing like poetry. She says that humans brought something the mammoths had forgotten, the ability to dream of tomorrow instead of only remembering yesterday. Together, both species are becoming something neither could be alone. The delegates were quiet as they absorbed this message. Finally, the woman from Mars spoke again. There are reports that other alien species are asking to make contact with your colony. Is that true? Hana nodded. 3 different species have sent diplomatic missions. They've heard about what we've achieved here, and they want to learn how it's possible. And what do you tell them? The same thing I'd tell anyone, Hana said. Start by listening, really listening. Don't assume you know what someone is thinking just because they look different from you. They walked to the memorial garden where the victims of the original mammoth attack were remembered. 47 stone markers stood in peaceful rows, including those of Hana's family. But these were not just graves. They had become a place of learning, where the story of tragedy transformed into hope was told to visitors from across the galaxy. Do you ever regret it? Asked the young delegate. Saving the mammoth that killed your family? Hana knelt beside her brother's grave and placed flowers that glowed with bioluminescent light, a hybrid created by mammoth and human botanists working together. I regret that people died, she said softly. I regret that we didn't understand each other sooner, but I don't regret choosing compassion over revenge. That choice led to everything we have now. As evening approached, they returned to the city center where a celebration was beginning. It was the 5th anniversary of the Battle of New Haven, and both species marked it as the day their true friendship began. Mammoth elders told the story of the battle through trumpet songs that made the ground vibrate with their power. Human musicians had learned to play instruments that harmonized with these songs, creating music that seemed to come from the planet itself. Children of both species sat together listening to the tales, their faces filled with wonder. To them, the friendship between humans and mammoths was simply the way the world had always been. The children give me the most hope, Hana told her guests, as they watched a young human girl learning to speak mammoth language from her giant friend. They don't see differences as barriers. They see them as opportunities to learn something new. Captain Yang Ho approached as the celebrations continued around them. Hana, we've received another message from Earth. The Colonial Senate wants to make you an official ambassador to alien species. They're offering you a position on Earth itself. Hana looked around at the city she had helped build, at the mammoth families celebrating alongside human families, at Goliath demonstrating his latest invention to amazed onlookers. Thank you, but my work is here, she said. This is where the real diplomacy happens. Not in fancy offices, but in the daily choice to understand each other. As the night deepened, bioluminescent plants began to glow throughout the city, a technology developed through mammoth knowledge of natural light sources. The entire settlement seemed to pulse with gentle radiance, visible from space as a beacon of cooperation. Hana walked to her favorite spot on the city's edge, where she could see both the lights of civilization and the wild forests beyond. Goliath joined her there, as he had every night for 5 years. Do you think we've really changed things? She asked him. Or are we just one small example in a big, often cruel galaxy? Goliath's response was complex, full of philosophical concepts that human language struggled to express. But the meaning was clear. Every great change began with a single choice to see things differently. Every bridge between worlds started with one person willing to take the first step. Word of Kepler 442b had indeed spread throughout known space. Other planets were trying to establish their own interspecies colonies. Not all succeeded, but some did, and each success made the next attempt more likely. The delegates will go home and tell others what they've seen here, Hana said. Some will listen, some won't, but the idea will spread. She looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them other species were making their own first contacts, their own choices between fear and friendship. The mammoth trampled her village. She forgave it. And together, they had shown the galaxy that even the greatest tragedies could become the seeds of something beautiful. In the years that followed, Hana's story would be told on 1,000 worlds. It would become legend, then myth, then something even greater. A reminder that the most human thing of all was not the ability to conquer or destroy, but the courage to understand and forgive. And in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, that reminder would light the way for species not yet born toward futures not yet dreamed.